Millionaire refuses service from a black waitress, then sees her holding something life-changing. He walked into the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind where money gets you anything except forgiveness. When a young black waitress approached his table, he didn't just dismiss her. He made sure everyone saw it. The room went quiet, then cold, as if humiliation was part of the menu. But seconds later, her trembling hands revealed something she wasn't supposed to have, something that instantly drained the color from his face. What could a waitress be holding that could destroy a millionaire's world in one breath? Aaliyah Morgan's life ran on schedules and second chances. By day, she rode 2 buses to a community college campus, squeezing study time between shifts and a phone buzzing with updates about her mother's treatments. By night, she tied her hair back, pinned on a crisp apron, and stepped into Lucille, a downtown restaurant built for people who never checked price tags. She had learned how to move quietly, how to smile even when customers looked past her, and how to keep her dignity intact when someone treated her like part of the furniture. Most nights, the worst she faced was the familiar sting of being underestimated. But Lucille had its own unspoken rules, and Aaliyah understood them better than anyone. Certain tables were high risk, meaning one mistake could cost a job. Certain guests expected control, not service. That evening, the dining room felt different, tighter, sharper. The staff moved with rehearsed urgency as a private party began filtering in, suits and perfume and easy laughter filling the air. Aaliyah noticed how managers hovered, how the kitchen rushed plates that weren't even on the menu. One name kept surfacing in quick, nervous glances: Grant Hale, a self-made millionaire who loved being seen as generous, as untouchable, as the kind of man who could make problems disappear. Aaliyah didn't know why she was suddenly assigned to the section closest to him. She only knew what she carried in her hand besides her tray: a small, sealed envelope she'd found earlier, marked with a name she couldn't ignore: his. And before she even reached the table, she could feel the room preparing to choose a side. Aaliyah moved toward Grant Hale's table with the careful calm she'd practiced for years, balancing a tray like it weighed nothing. Up close, he looked even more polished than the room's expensive watch, tailored jacket, the relaxed posture of someone used to rooms reshaping themselves around him. He barely glanced at the menu before his eyes landed on her, and something in his expression hardened, like her presence had offended him. He didn't raise his voice at first. He didn't need to. With a small gesture and a dismissive look, he signaled to the manager that he wanted someone else. Not because of a mistake Aaliyah had made, she hadn't even served him yet, but because of who she was. The request carried the kind of entitlement that didn't bother trying to hide its meaning. The manager reacted instantly, smiling too widely, nodding too quickly. Aaliyah watched the familiar choreography unfold: the apologetic posture, the fake politeness, the silent agreement that keeping a wealthy customer comfortable mattered more than keeping her human. A coworker was pulled from another section to replace her, and Aaliyah was guided away as if she were the problem that needed removing. Around them, the dining room kept breathing, but differently. Now forks paused, eyes flicked up and away, and a few phones angled subtly, hungry for a moment worth recording. Aaliyah felt heat rise behind her eyes, not from embarrassment alone, but from the old, exhausting knowledge that, if she protested too strongly, she'd be labeled aggressive. If she said nothing, she'd be erased. She forced herself to keep moving, yet her hand tightened around the sealed envelope hidden beneath her tray liner. She had found it earlier near the private lounge, slipped between 2 leather chairs like it had been dropped in a rush. The writing on the front was clean and confident: Grant Hale's name, and beneath it, a law firm stamp. She hadn't meant to look inside until she saw another name on a page that had shifted loose in the corner: her mother's name. Aaliyah had reread it twice in the staff restroom, heart thudding so hard she felt it in her throat. The document was official dates, signatures, and a cold language that suggested decisions made long ago, decisions meant to stay buried. There was something else too, something thicker inside the envelope, like a small object wrapped carefully to protect it. She couldn't unsee it, couldn't pretend she hadn't found it, and she couldn't hand it to a manager who would treat it like lost property, not like a message that might change a life. So she turned back. When Aaliyah approached the table again, this time, not with water or a plate, but with the envelope, visible, Grant's eyes snapped to it. His composure shifted so fast it was almost imperceptible, like a crack racing through glass. For a split second, he looked less like a king and more like a man who had just seen a ghost. Then the room tightened. His attention locked on her hand. He signaled again, sharper this time, and the manager rushed in, as if summoned by fear itself. Aaliyah could feel the situation turning, the way power can transform suspicion into certainty. She could almost predict the next steps: accusations without proof, security appearing out of nowhere, her job evaporating in real time. And that's exactly what started to happen. A security guard moved in close, blocking her path. The manager's face was rigid with forced pleasantness. But Aaliyah saw what was underneath it: panic at the thought of upsetting Grant Hale, and relief at having someone easier to pressure. The envelope became the center of everything, not because anyone cared what it contained, but because it was in her hands, and in this room, that alone was enough to make her guilty. As the guard reached for her arm, the envelope shifted, and one of the papers slid out just enough for a bold line at the top to show an official heading and a name that matched hers. Grant Hale's face drained all at once. He stared at that single, exposed line like it had the power to end him. And in that moment, Aaliyah realized the envelope wasn't just lost mail, it was a secret someone had paid to keep quiet. The only question was, why was it connected to her mother? And what exactly was wrapped inside, waiting to be revealed? The guard's hand closed around Aaliyah's arm as if she were already proven guilty, steering her away from the table with the practiced certainty reserved for people who looked like her in places like this. The manager hovered beside them, face tight, eyes darting between Grant Hale and the watching room, as though the only emergency was keeping a powerful man comfortable. Aaliyah didn't struggle. She didn't raise her voice. She simply lifted the envelope higher, refusing to let it disappear into someone else's pocket. The guard reached for it anyway. The paper tore, documents slid out and fluttered onto the white tablecloth like fallen ash-official pages stamped by a law firm. A medical authorization form with her mother's name printed in cold black ink, and a single sheet that made Grant's posture collapse by inches. The heading was unmistakable, even from a distance, the kind of legal language that didn't exist unless someone's entire life had been split open. A paternity declaration tied to a trust distribution. Aaliyah's breath caught as something heavier dropped from the envelope and landed in her palm. A ring, not costume jewelry, not a cheap trinket, a thick worn signet ring with a crest engraved into the golden heirloom that had been handled for decades. The kind of object families protect like proof. The kind of object a man like Grant Hale would recognize without being told what it was. His face emptied of arrogance so quickly it looked like fear. His eyes locked on the ring, then on the papers, then on Aaliyah, finally seeing her. Not as a waitress, not as a problem to remove, but as a consequence he couldn't buy off. Around them, the dining room shifted. Phones rose higher. A few patrons leaned in, no longer entertained by gossip, suddenly witnessing something that felt like truth forcing its way into the open. Aaliyah held the ring steady, her arms still trapped in the guard's grip, her dignity the only thing she refused to surrender. And as Grant stared at what she was holding, what she had every right to hold, the entire room understood one thing at once. This wasn't just racism on display anymore. This was a reckoning. The guard's grip loosened, not out of kindness, but out of confusion, because the story the room had been ready to believe no longer fit the evidence scattered across the tablecloth. The manager's authority evaporated in real time, replaced by a frantic need to control what couldn't be controlled anymore. The witnesses, the recordings, the fact that Aaliyah hadn't stolen anything. She had uncovered it. Grant Hale stayed seated, frozen behind his wealth and reputation, watching his carefully curated image buckle under something as simple as paper and an old ring. For years, he had been able to decide who belonged in the room and who didn't. In one breathless minute, the room decided for him. Aaliyah walked out of Lucille with her hands shaking, not from victory, but from the brutal realization that she'd almost been removed physically, publicly, over a suspicion rooted in skin color. The ring felt heavy in her palm, but heavier still was the memory of how quickly people were willing to see her as a threat. What followed wasn't a movie ending. There was paperwork, verification, and the slow grind of institutions that suddenly moved faster when a powerful man was at risk. The documents tied her mother to a past that had been kept quiet with money and silence. The trust was real, the connection was real, and the humiliation she endured was real. To be, because none of that stopped the initial cruelty from happening. Aaliyah's life changed, but not in the way people assume. Money can't erase the moment a room turns on you. Status can't undo the way racism makes strangers feel entitled to your body, your job, your dignity. What it did give her was a platform, and she used it to make sure the story didn't stay inside a restaurant that had tried to sweep her out like a mess. Because the hardest part isn't proving you're innocent. It's surviving a world that assumes you're guilty. So ask yourself, how many times has someone been treated like Ollie only, without an envelope in their hand, to force the truth into the open?